2021, I tweet about a book by an American journalist called Andy Ngo, covering the BLM riots and the Antifa BLM. It just completely blew up, and it blew up my life. All these sort of Antifa trolls were dogpiling me and my bandmates, so I issued an apology.
In this episode, I sit down with Winston Marshall, the former lead guitarist and banjo player of Mumford Sons.
The duty of the artist is to tell the truth. So with this groveling apology that I issued, and I participated in a lie.
Now he's the host of The Winston Marshall Show and co-founder of the Dissident Dialog's Festival of Ideas.
So after all that incident that happened 3 years ago, I feel now it's a duty to speak the truth as I see it.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Keller. Winston Marshall, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Jan, thanks for having me. We made it happen.
Well, yeah, we've been talking about this for quite some time, and
our paths have gone like this, and now
you're here in New York.
I'm here in beautiful skyline, with this lovely evening.
Well, no, it's fantastic to have you, and it was amazing to be at Dissident Dialogues and see you on stage, sort of in the thick of what seems to be your thing right now. And just thinking back to 3 years ago about this time, your life kind of profoundly changed. So, for the very few that might not be aware of what happened, I just want to kind of go back there a little bit. I mean, you were a rock star. You had 4 albums with Mumford and Sons. You were also a banjo player, which is rare among rock stars, as I understand it. And
if you want to be a rock star, don't pick up the banjo.
and really wonderful music. Grammys and, basically top of the game, 20,000 people in stadiums. Oh, I mean, first of all, what's it like to have that going on? I mean,
it's 3 years on from it, you appreciate even more so how, we were talking before the cameras were rolling about miracles, and you're referring to your wife, but I think I see that as well with what happened with the band. It's a bit of a miracle. I thought we were good, and I was very proud of the music we made, and we worked very hard, but it's one thing to be good, and it's another thing to have success like we were so lucky and blessed to have. And I really think the stars aligned. Maybe the world wanted that kind of music at that time. I was just reflecting because I saw a poster from our first US tour, which was September 2008, which is exactly when the Wall Street bailout was. And I was thinking, well, isn't that interesting that we came to America just at that period, and then our success kind of was at the same time as the I guess the beginning of what I call the populist age. And I think there was a whole cultural movement against things that were synthetic. So it wasn't just us. There were bands like Avett Brothers, Lumineers, Old Crow Medicine Show, just a kind of folk revival, and other English ones as well. And anyway, so we were a good band, but if I can say so myself. But then I think the stars were aligned, and the world had America had an appetite for folksy music, and going back to that. So there was a period there where we had a really good run. And then you mentioned Dissident Dialogues, which also should be explained, because your viewers won't know what that is. But it was a festival of ideas that we held in Brooklyn. And the continuation there is that when with the band, we were hosting festivals, we were putting festivals on across America. We'd go into towns, work with the towns, bring in local food, local booze, local artists, and we'd do these things. And so I thought, having been in the ideas space, there's a desire for community here. There's a desire for people want somewhere to commune and to come together, a bit like how you might love a band, go to see the band, even though you don't have any friends who like them, and then at the concert you'd be like, loads of people like this band. I think that's kind of what we wanted to create with this festival of ideas. So there's a kind of a continuation there. Also, you and I have been to loads of these sort of conferences, and some of them are quite, without poo-pooing any of them, because it's a very hard thing to pull off, but some of them are, stuffy buildings. We wanted to do some kind of a fun rock and roll version of that. So that's kind of what Dissident Dialogues. Anyway, for your viewers, I've just painted a very bizarre picture of a muddle of things there, but that's kind of a sketch of where I went from there to there. Yeah.
Well, and I absolutely do want to talk about that evolution. But let's just talk briefly about what actually happened, because you were, I mean, top of the game, right?
Yeah. So 3 years ago, as you say, it was the pandemic. So peak hysteria. Also, music industry, BLM hysteria, and you'll remember Black Tuesday, which was Black Square Tuesday, which is, I think, June 2020. Anyway, whilst that was going on, I was tweeting about books I was reading through the pandemic. 2021, I tweet about a book by an American journalist called Andy Ngo, covering the BLM riots and the Antifa BLM, including the 19 deaths in the first 14 days, the siege, insurrection technically, of the Portland Federal Courthouse for the entire month of June 2020. This book categorized, or documented rather, all of these activities, and somehow, even though I had 3,000 followers on Twitter, by something like 24 hours later, it went up all the trending charts. I think in America as well as in my country. By the end of the weekend, it was a segment on Tucker and The View. It just completely blew up, and it blew up my life. Long story short, I issued an apology. All these sort of Antifa trolls were dogpiling me and my bandmates, and I appreciated that I didn't know everything that was going on, so I thought, okay, well, maybe there's more I don't know here, maybe I don't know this whole story. So I issued an apology, under considerable duress, I would say, but I still did it somewhat willingly. And then spent a few months researching, looking into it, and came to the conclusion not only that I wasn't wrong to tweet the book, that it was bad, the stuff that Antifa had done. It was bad, the riots of the BLM, whatever the cause, motives behind them. And I also came to the conclusion that it was bad that I had apologized, because in apologizing I participated in a lie. And so I came to the conclusion that all that could be done was that I certainly had to retract the apology, but it was also made perfectly clear to me from with the band that having those opinions, it wasn't fair on them for me to have my opinions, because it would have professional repercussions for them. So it felt like the only way forward was to leave, sadly.
And any regrets at this point? Because what you said, you were looking back at those years and how amazing they were moments ago.
Yeah, I don't really have time. Regrets aren't helpful particularly. I look forward. I think, how can I build? How can I grow? My big lesson for all of this is tell the truth and play the chips as they lie. That's the only way through life, you know. You don't know what's ahead. Like the story of Job, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord. You don't know what's going to happen, but all you can hang on to is your soul, your dignity, and the truth, and it's your character that leads you in all those things. So
we share being inspired by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, and especially the "Live Not by Lies" essay, which I know you've referenced, and you've just a little bit obliquely referenced it again. How important is that?
In that period between my apology and my retraction, there's an essay someone sent me at some point, "Live Not by Lies," which he published, I think, in 1974 as he was being exiled from Moscow. It's about 5 pages long, and I must have read it certainly at least five, maybe 4 or 5 times in that period. I keep coming back to it because there's a paragraph that says, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like, "How dare you call yourself an artist if you're not prepared to live by the truth or tell the truth?" And he's obviously talking about life in the Soviet Union, but why that resonated so much with me is that the duty of the artist is to tell the truth. So with this apology, this groveling apology that I issued, that was also not me, or not real. It seemed to me that would detract from all work I would do going forward. So if it was lyrics or songs, like, it kind of meant that anything I would do in the future couldn't be genuine because of that article, because it would show an inconsistency in pursuit of truth. So in that sense, Solzhenitsyn was a huge impact on me. I actually then became I started a podcast over there, and my first guest was Aleksandr's son, Ignat Solzhenitsyn, who's a phenomenal artist here in New York. And that's another funny sequence of events that you don't appreciate, and he's become a wonderful friend.
The line between good and evil cuts through every human heart is a very important principle that I think we forget about when I see what's happening in the world today. One more thing about the music side. Is there some moment that you remember in particular from that time that you cherish, or you remember that's kind of very sticks out in your mind?
Oh, I mean, I was there for 14 years. There's a lot of moments.
I mean, you got to play with Bob Dylan. That's kind of
yeah.
Sounds almost cosmic somehow.
Yeah, that was crazy. At the Grammys, we had, we couldn't quite believe it. Sometimes you meet these people. When I was a boy, these were all posters on my bedroom wall, and then you meet them and they're real. And we were lucky to. I was just thinking about who the loveliest of a lot of. There's some nice people, but really the loveliest was Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin, because he was so disarming. He immediately started talking about football, so it was just lovely. Because he's from I think he's from Wolves or something, and of all of these people, it's very daunting meeting them. But he would just immediately go, "Oh, did you see what happened in the Prem on the weekend?" I thought he was very sweet. He's a very nice man.
So then you've had a podcast in the Spectator, and I want to chart that a little bit too, because it's not necessarily obvious that a rock star banjo player, if I can say Grammy awarding, is going to become a meaningful podcaster. We've overlapped quite a number of guests between our shows, but you have some very big minds on there, right? And I'm curious if you would dare to say which one has been most impactful, or quite impactful, at least for you.
Well, actually, at the beginning of this year, I was in Israel and interviewed Douglas Murray, and I think that must have been, with no disrespect for my other guests, that must have been the highlight. It was so moving. He's so compelling, and it was quite emotional. There's something, obviously, his ability with words, but his ability to really get to the essence of something, really get to the heart and crux of the most difficult issues, whether it's Israel, Palestine, or the various issues we've had in Britain and in America. And he's just put out an amazing documentary about the fentanyl crisis here. He's a fearless journalist and such a wit. That's why he's so funny. He's a profound dude who has ability to engage with all aspects of human nature.
Well, and the strange death of Europe, and then the war on the West. The strange death of Europe is kind of prophetic. He's unapologetic in truth-telling and what he understands to be the truth. And that I find that also very inspiring. Right?
We need Douglas to run. I think Douglas could save our country. We need him to. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about Britain here, but
okay.
I wanted to be our prime minister. It'd be fantastic. We just thought he's the guy, because this is another thing in Westminster. No one speaks the truth. No one says what they're thinking. They're so hamstrung by political correctness. So I see the same thing here. That's a big problem, political correctness. It's literally killing people.
Do you find that curious that it's this, people would call it American Marxism or critical social justice, wokeism. This is kind of an American product from Herbert Marcuse, the Frankfurt School, and somehow it made its way to the UK, and at least in terms of speech, it's become massively influential in the political class and the elite class. Yeah,
I totally agree. I mean, we look at it here in New York. You can see what's going up in Gaza Plaza at Columbia. It seems to me that it's still a lot of the same crowd as the BLM riots in 2020, Summer of Love. It's all these overeducated children who have been spared from reality for so long that they don't actually. They live in another plane. I can't quite work it. Maybe I need to. But as you mentioned Solzhenitsyn earlier, there's good in them. So how do we engage with that? How do we bring it out?
Let me ask this. They believe they're fighting the far right. What do you make of this far right moniker? I remember, when you wrote your Medium essay about quitting, you said, I believe if I recall correctly, you said, the far left isn't good, but the far right is equally reprehensible. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And that far right is thrown around these days, kind of like popcorn.
Oh, I'd agree. Yeah, I have no problems condemning the far right. I do think that the term far right, just like racist or bigot or fascist, or it's the same way that Hillary used the word deplorable. These words are used to shut people down because they sting. Like this, I always called it for reading a book. J.K. Rowling is somehow far right and bigoted because of her pro-women positions. It's just like utterly senseless, but it has a way of censoring the general population into keeping them out, making them want to avoid even getting involved, which helps the ideologues keep winning the debate, I guess.
In the UK right now, this political correctness, at least around speech, is really metastasizing. There's police, as I understand it, arresting people for things which are kind of shocking here.
Yeah.
The First Amendment is under assault here. It's very clear, but it feels like a whole different level in Britain. Why do you think that is?
Well, we have a bunch of things going on at the same time. We have something called a non-crime hate incident. You'll notice that hate crime is a word coming in that's into the parlance. I'm not sure I can quite see the point in having the difference between a crime and a hate crime. If crime's a crime, I don't think it adds much to the conversation knowing whether it's a hate crime or not. But in Britain we have a non-crime hate incident, which is you can be reported to the police for having committed some instance of hate. You won't be tried on it. It's in the eyes of whoever's reporting you. If they deem it hateful, you can't get rid of it off your record. You can't contest it. You don't even know it's there. But future employees can see whether it's there. So it's totally Orwellian. And then there's you refer to incidences of insane free speech issues. I'll give you an example. There's a girl in Liverpool. I think she's a teenager, 19 or something, and she put some Snoop Dogg lyrics on her Instagram, on an Instagram reel. It might have included the N-word or something. Anyway, she was charged and then made to wear a collar around her ankle. There's another instance I think it was in Leeds, where the West Yorkshire Police arrested a young girl who had autism. This young girl had pointed at a police officer and said, look, it's a lesbian like Auntie so-and-so, because the autistic girl thought that the police officer looked like her lesbian aunt. They ended up arrested. There's a horrific video about it. And at the same time, then we see the horrific stuff going on in London with very vile anti-Semitic, anti-Israel stuff, and just being completely left alone. In fact, it's worse than that. You'll see in the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel marches in London, not only are the pro-Palestine left alone, and I would say to some extent they should be, except when they incite violence or support prescribed terrorist groups, but at the same time there's an Iranian guy, whose name I've forgotten, but he goes and he holds up a poster that says Hamas is terrorist, and on 2 occasions he's been arrested. So there's a ridiculous double standard here. And there's even more obscene that there's been examples of Jews wearing yarmulkes or Magen Davids, and the police videos of this, of the police asking them to either leave or they'll be arrested or have the Magen David taken down because they would worry that their presence would incite some sort of trouble. And so, yeah, it's a terrible time to be Jewish, and that's another conversation. It's a terrible time to be Jewish in Britain at the moment.
When all this happened 3 years ago, you didn't expect to effectively become not only have you been having guests on the show, you've also become a commentator on your own. You've had a column in the Spectator. And now this is one issue where you're commenting. I go back to this question originally. It doesn't seem obvious that someone coming from,
Well, I'll tell you something that I have observed, which is very sad, which is that, so after all that incident that happened 3 years ago, I feel now it's a duty to speak the truth as I see it. Why make the sacrifice and then not speak the truth? I've been outspoken on Israel issues for a while. I've published at the Jewish Chronicle. I've been outspoken throughout this latest Israel-Hamas war. I get private messages from Jewish people that I used to work with in the music industry and those I didn't work with. Some of them in powerful positions, others not. But they can't speak in the music industry. And they thank me for writing and speaking, knowing that I can. And that's kind of terrifying, is that there's a lot of self-censorship going on. And I think that's because the young crop of artists, let's say the 15 to 25-year-olds, are all part of that, have that same anti-Israel ideology, anti-Zionist ideology. And so Jews in the industry are very careful not to speak because they don't want to set those people off. And I know you've interviewed so many people from different industries, and you'll have noticed that the academy is particularly bad. Now, it seems to me the academy is worse than the music industry, some of the stories I've heard. The music industries are not far behind, the creative industries, and so I would even say maybe theatre is ahead of the academy. Just, you cannot speak, you cannot... For instance, theatre, there's one Jewish actress I interviewed called Tracy Ann Oberman, said that Jews felt scared wearing a Magen David into work. This is even before the war, because they would get questioned about Israel just for wearing that, and challenged on it. So there's a weird... the anti-Semitism stuff was completely obvious to me when I was living in New York back in 2016, 17, 18. People were talking about white privilege every bloody minute of the day, and it was obvious to me that ideology ended up in anti-Semitism. It's the same ideology. It's the same stuff that was been said in 1930s Germany. So, yeah, I don't...
What do you mean exactly? The same ideology as 1930s Germany. How does that work in your mind?
It's an assumption that because some part of one identity group of people are overachieving in a sector or various sectors, that the whole group are then not only achieving but also oppressing the others, even when most of the group are on the breadline. That's the same as white privilege concept, which is that, look at all these white males in these top positions. Okay, well then you're ignoring the tens of millions of poor whites. And then the other aspect is, if you play that game out about privilege, okay, which of the whites is achieving most? Which of the whites is oppressing? And you end up getting to the Jews, because the Jews are a high achieving group. So it was obvious that stuff, and I think a lot of progressive Jews now see that. Bill Ackman's a famous example. He's speaking out against DEI because after October 7th, it was like, and more specifically, the reaction to October 7th, the Holocaust denial in real time, and that's when it seemed that people saw that the white privilege ideology is actually pretty anti-Semitic at its core.
As we finish up, you mentioned it's so hard for so many people to speak up in so many industries, and it's this massive cultural phenomenon, right? This extreme political correctness, perhaps let's call it that. It took October 7th to catalyze a whole bunch of people. Why does it take something like that, something so extreme, to catalyze people to speak up on things that they already know? As you did, obviously, as you were, at some level when you went through your situation 3 years ago. And what would it take to shift that, I guess?
On what topic?
I mean, there's so many, but just, rational approaches to the world, as opposed to very extreme left-wing perspectives on how the world should work, which seem to be the view that you need to uphold, or the one that's allowed to be spoken about.
Not to shit on rationality, but seeing as actually rationality is something that Dawkins spoke a lot about at our festival on the weekend. We're not rational beings. Humans aren't rational beings. And I think we're spiritual beings and we're irrational beings. And so actually being rational is the rare state of being, I guess. I would not say that I'm rational most of the time. I try to be. I try to contain my emotions and passions and think about things carefully. But it seems every year we have a new thing that we're all being irrational about. With 2020, it was the pandemic and BLM. Same thing happened in 2016 with Brexit and Trump. And it happened, and then October 7th was just another one of those things that it's like, oh shit. Like, people are mental.
What would you say to people who are in that state of, not being afraid to say something that they would like to, but there's such a cost, or seems to be such a cost?
Yeah, someone asked me that last night. I would say you don't need to recklessly say the truth, but you should not. But see, my story is that I was essentially forced to lie, and if I hadn't been, I think I would still be in the band, because I wouldn't have had to retract anything. But I think it's important not to lie. It's not to partake in the lie. To paraphrase Solzhenitsyn, when you find yourself nodding along to things that you know not to be true, you might want to have a think. Take that opportunity to have a look, because I know a few people in that situation. Or if you're forced to wear rainbow shoelaces, or post something on social media that you don't feel like you support, maybe stop and think. You don't want to participate in that. That's where your soul and your integrity is at stake, which, as we said earlier, is all we got in this world.
Well, Winston Marshall, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Jan, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for joining Winston Marshall and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellick.